Taylor Decker's on my All-22 fantasy team, by the way.
Stop it. Nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Taylor,
I don't care, and I'm in the league.
I'm just trying to hype up the future of fantasy football here. They told me we could hype it up.
Nobody cares about your fantasy team. That's one of the
It's
cardinal
my
rules of broadcasting. Regardless of the medium, they don't care.
So the strategic component to this game is through the roof.
Your predictions, right? Your forecasting in fantasy football into how good is this player?
It's gonna change the industry.
Yeah, I moved to the old town where it goes down. Look at me now. I wrote my goals down. I hold it down. Made myself proud. Say, look at me now.
Hello and welcome to the All-22 podcast. My name is Chris Lombardi. I am joined by Bobby Acker and Ray Cotto, and we are the co-founders of All-22. Bobby, I'm not going to just jump into it this time. I'm not going to do that to you. Last week I did it. I'm not going to do it this week. I'm going to give you your opportunity. I hope you enjoy it. The Giants are 2-0.
Again, guys, I do not take this for granted. All right? 2-0, baby. I expect to be looking at all these statistics that were 0-2. 0-2 teams make it 5% of the times to the playoffs. Now I'm looking at 2-0, the complete opposite. Like, yeah, this is unreal. Unreal. Yeah, couldn't be happier right now. I've seen a lot of stuff about how we're like the worst 2-0 team in football. But you also see, people say you are what your record says you are. And I truly believe that. So good teams find a way to win in tough games, and bad teams find a way to lose. So I'm happy about it.
I don't have any way to prove this. And Bobby, I noticed you do this a lot, so I'm just going to do it too. I had Andrew Thomas as my number one tackle of that draft class. And I feel like I'm finally benefiting from that. Even though I don't have any record of it, I'm going to say people can just believe that I actually made that case.
Speaking of records, okay, we do have it on record now that we do a podcast of Ray saying, oh, it's just 1 year. It's just 1 year. It one good year. You do remember that, right, Ray? Because I can find the videotape.
I didn't say he was going to only have one good year the rest of his career. I just said
the
out of
implication.
the 2 years, it was just 1 year. Like, that's all.
It was
No
the
implications there. It's like Cooper Rush miracle game, but yeah, let's just talk about, the Giants. So
I'm pretty sure you said it's 1 year, relax. And now look at him.
Relax.
Highest rated tackle in the league. Highest rated offensive lineman in the league. And I think it's by like 8 grade points too.
And how do you feel about him going against Parsons this week?
You guys will probably put him on Neal. Super cowardly move, but that's probably what'll happen.
I get it. Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. So when we get your lineups, your weekly lineups, we're going to see your players going against the toughest matchups, right? That's how you're going to set it because you're not a coward.
Yes.
You're going to start guards that line up against Aaron Donald on Sunday?
Just to spite you now, yes.
And his plan's working.
And as great as Andrew Thomas's performance was, it really was like another terrible week for offensive linemen. So like, I don't want to talk about it too much, but it was a really bad one. So it's great to be the best, but he was kind of like the best of the worst, But you're still 2-0. You're still 2-0.
Dude, it's almost a 90 grade. I'm happy with that, even if there's 5 other guys ahead of him.
Diminish shine.
Especially
the worst.
Especially I saw somebody repost I think it was Louis Riddick who was going on about how he was the worst offensive tackle in that draft class, and by far the worst. Straight up saying that. So it's good. I'm going to take my victory lap now. I think it's time. It's good.
I think one more thing you can feel good about is, right, like even if Evan Neal struggles a little, doesn't mean he's going to be bad, right? Like tackles take a little bit of time to develop. I think people have gotten so used to this like instant reward thing with offensive linemen, which really shouldn't exist. So, should make you feel a little bit better about Neal.
I mean, anybody who's not Nate Solder, I feel pretty good about, to be honest.
Gosh. But anyway, jumping into it, we are introducing a new series today. So going forward, we will be challenging experts in the fantasy space to what we're calling All-22 Versus. Bobby, do you want to let everybody know what that actually is?
Yeah. So basically what we'll do every week is we're going to go head-to-head against one of our friends within the All-22 community. So this week, for instance, we're going to have Jon Macri on here, who's a big IDP guy. So we're going to see how the All-22 guys go up against the IDP community. So what we did was we set some rules, right? We didn't want to just come in here and pick Justin Jeffersons and, the Pat Mahomes of the world. So our rule was that you couldn't pick anybody for your team that was top 5 in All-22 ADP. right? We want you guys to come away with this with some start suggestions and things like that. See some of the lesser known guys in our lineup. Also add a little bit of a challenge to it. But we're really excited to roll this series out. I think we're going to have a lot of fun with this.
And where can people find our picks for the week?
Yeah, so we'll have our picks right here if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're not, we'll have this on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, so you guys can check out who we picked.
Awesome. And you mentioned John. So with that, I'd like to announce our special guest of the day, the first ever All-22 guest on our podcast, and our challenger in the first ever All-22 verse, and that is Jon Macri. John, it's awesome to have you here.
Guys, thank you for having me. I told you before, I'm honored to be the first guest. It's nice to not have to follow anybody, so nobody has set the bar too high for me to try to beat now. So I can set the bar low, and then the next people coming in can obviously top that. So, but I still appreciate you guys having me on as the first guest, and yeah, excited with the platform, obviously, and excited to try my hand at this All-22 versus thing here, and we'll see how I do against you guys who have been deep into this stuff, obviously, for a while now. So I'm up against it, but I'll do my best.
Sweet, man. And before we jump into your picks, tell us a little bit about what you do with PFF and how you got started in the IDP space. And most importantly, what attracted you to All-22?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I started with PFF about 5 years ago as a part-time data collector. I've moved my way into a full-time data collection position, and I also work on the content side, doing some fantasy work there, mostly IDP. And yeah, I mean, as far as the All-22 stuff goes, I mean, this is the main thing that attracted me to it, is finding a fantasy game that actually judges players based on their on-field performance there, instead of just counting stats and the box score stuff, because that could be a little bit misleading sometimes, and isn't fully it doesn't fully reflect how a player actually performed in that week. So this was kind of the perfect way to do it, the way you guys have built it here. And then I got the chance to beta test it last year and loved it and got really active and into it. So happy to be a part of it again this year. And we're going to get a few more leagues going as the years go on for sure. So yeah, very excited, and love what you guys have done. And the site looks amazing as well. So that's really cool.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for being here today. And let's get started. I don't want to take up too much of your time, so we'll start by jumping into some of your picks. I noticed back, Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, started with Jalen Hurts. I mean, even I was a little bit surprised at how high he was grading already this season. But watching the games, it shouldn't really be that much of a surprise. He's played a pretty clean 2 games to start the year, 0 turnover-worthy plays in those 2 games, which is obviously a big thing to help his grade and maintain it at a high level. And he has the highest passing grade so far this season. So I cheated a little bit, and I would lean towards who's grading the highest at the quarterback position. I tried not to do that for all my positions, but a big fan of Jalen Hurts this year, and I really like the matchup going against Washington, who has a bottom 5 coverage grade as a team and a bottom 5 run defense grade. So Hurts can hopefully eat on the ground and through the air this week.
Yeah, that's a great pick. And I noticed you said that you really like Jalen Hurts for this year. Now, Ray thinks he's a glorified fullback playing quarterback. He said that on the pod 1,000 times.
I might have said it once off camera, but continue.
What do you think of Jalen Hurts' trajectory moving forward beyond this year?
Yeah, I mean, I was a little bit skeptical too, like when he came into the NFL, and after his first year, he didn't really show a ton. There was a lot of question marks around his game, and I mean, a lot of people have pointed this out, but he's gotten better each season. Obviously, it's only a 2-game sample size this year, but he's gotten better again. So, he has what NFL offenses seem to covet, which is that dual threat quarterback. And if he can, start making those passes like he has already this season, he's got the weapons to do it. And I mean, that's got to help, right? So yeah, not just for this season, he's starting to grow on me as well. And I think he can be a nice dynasty asset going forward.
Yeah, I happen to agree with you. Absolutely. Is there any like behind the scenes PFF data that you take into consideration as you're setting your formations each week on offense and defense? Like, is there any, do you always go 11? Is it a weekly kind of thing?
Yeah, I think I mean, I pretty much always go 11 just because I punted the running back position because, as we know, they don't matter. And this, obviously, for this platform, their scoring isn't weighted very heavily either, so that's taken into account. So, didn't want to use the running backs. I think there's more good wide receivers to take advantage of than running back. Running back's been like a really kind of volatile position as far as grading goes over the years. It's hard to kind of find a player at the running back position that consistently grades well. So I was kind of back and forth with who to play every week. So I think I'm just going to stick with 11 personnel going forward and play my wide receivers.
We noticed going through your list here, right? So heading to wide receiver, you doubled down on the Philly-Washington matchup here with A.J. Brown. So is that some sort of, correlation you feel or notice between a quarterback and a wide receiver grade, or is it just based on the opponent being Washington this week, or do you factor in like the quarterback's performance when making a move at receiver, since you do mention, you're moving towards that 11 personnel package and the receivers obviously being a big part of that. So what do you take into account when making that decision? And I think A.J. Brown's a good pick. He's a beast, but just want to hear some more about your thought process there.
Yeah, for sure. So as far as like the wide receiver kind of quarterback stack that I did here, I don't know how well it's going to work, but yeah, like I said, I do like Jalen Hurts, especially for this week. And I think, as far as like how the grading works for receivers, some of it is production based, right? Because they need to get the ball to be able to get positive or negative grades. So I think, just that connection that Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown have already kind of showed this season. Hurts looking for him on the majority of plays is going to help get that grade up there. A.J. Brown's already the fourth highest wide receiver in grade this year so far. I think it's 86.7 receiving grade. And then again, like just coming back to that matchup against Washington, they're not a great coverage unit, or they haven't been so far this year. They're above average in zone coverage rate, and that's something that A.J. Brown has really kind of dominated in. He owns a 94.9 receiving grade against zone coverages. So he's going to eat, I think. And I really wanted that combo in there because, who doesn't love A.J. Brown? And my wide receivers, they're kind of the obvious choices, but A.J. Brown was one that I really wanted.
I think we should have made him off limits, guys.
Yeah,
he said top 5 ADP and he was 6th, so
it's genius.
Yeah.
Just to recap, John's receiver group, for those of you that are listening: A.J. Brown, Stephon Diggs, and Drake London. Some really good picks there.
Yeah, and then at tight end, Tyler Higbee. So Higbee's grades seem to be floated by his receiving grade, right? Are we correct in assuming you picked him based on Arizona's 38.7 team coverage grade, or do you think he has some sneaky blocking ability in there that you're banking on?
Yeah, it's mostly for the receiving grade against that coverage unit. I really like Higbee. I know he doesn't have like these eye-popping grades, like a 62.9 offensive grade, something like that. But yeah, getting the Cardinals in week 3, I really don't think they have any idea what they're doing on defense yet. They're moving Isaiah Simmons around all over the place, taking him off the field. Zaven Collins has like a 37.5 coverage grade. He's the top linebacker. That's who Higbee's probably going to get a lot of looks with. So I think Stafford and the Rams, their offense is going to get it together. And Higbee's been, he's been a big part of their offense so far. So taking a shot there with a little bit of a dark horse this week.
Yeah, it's a really good pick. Going through your offensive line group now, start with your tackles, right? So you have Isaiah Wynn and Dion Dawkins. Now, Dion Dawkins is really the only Buffalo offensive lineman to grade well, which is really surprising considering how explosive their offense has been, right? From a grader's perspective, though, I've seen a lot like the strategy that All-22 users often take, where they try to find offensive linemen who are part of a good environment, right? One part of a good offensive line, which certainly isn't the case here for Dion Dawkins. But is there anything to that strategy, Could Dion Dawkins be grading better if he had better guys around him? Just want to get your perspective from somebody who is involved with the grading.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, just knowing like how the grading works, it's so focused on like each individual player, especially for the offensive line, right? There could be the occasional play where there's maybe not a good communication between offensive linemen passing off stunts or something like that, so they screw each other up kind of thing. So in that case, it could probably help. But for the most part, these guys grade on their own, especially, looking at Dion Dawkins kind of standing above the rest of the Bills offensive line unit. And I have a couple others as well on the offensive line who stand apart from their offensive lineman teammates. So I mostly just looking at which guys are actually good, because I know those guys are going to get looked at as individuals and not part of the unit for the most part.
Yeah, so let's go into that a little bit, right? You kind of led us right to the next point here. So the remainder of your offensive line, right? You have Nate Davis from Tennessee, Brandon Scherf at the other guard spot, and then Eric McCoy at center. So for Davis in particular, right, that Tennessee offensive line has not been great. It's still early in the season, but they haven't been running the ball very well. Davis has been a bright spot, but he's got a pretty tough matchup against Andrew Billings this week, who's been a solid player throughout. So we kind of talk about and debate amongst ourselves as to, what happens when you have that sort of, iron versus iron, unstoppable force versus immovable object type thing. Do they cancel each other out, in the trenches? Have you seen, the same thing there, or is there anything different that you take into account when you're thinking of matchups in the trenches there on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, when making your selections?
Yeah, definitely trying to look at matchups, especially for those positions that go kind of head to head, offensive line, defensive line, wide receiver, cornerback, things like that. Andrew Billings was really the only one on that Raiders interior defensive line that worries me. It's a weaker unit as a whole. And Davis is pretty much their best offensive lineman at this point since Taylor Lewan went down. So I feel good about him against. I hope he doesn't draw as many matchups against the Andrew Billings, that is, and gets mixed in there against some of the other Raiders defensive interior players. But and then also hoping that Max Crosby doesn't stunt inside a ton. That would help as well. But I just feel good about the matchup. I think for the most part, the Raiders interior defensive line has been pretty ineffective so far this season, but I do like Billings. I just picked him up off waivers this week because I saw you guys' tweet highlighting him. So I was like, oh yeah, that's right, Andrew Billings. So
you had a couple guys on this list from our tweets.
Do I? Okay, yeah, that's good.
We're gonna take all the credit for those, John.
Yeah. Pay attention.
Yeah, so even if we lose this week, we win.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
To round out your offense, you had Brendan Sheriff in Jacksonville at your other guard spot. And then you had center Eric McCoy out of New Orleans. But guys, we have an IDP guy on here. Let's jump into defense. And I wanted to ask you about Kenny Clark. And I have a two-part question here. So one, obviously Tampa's interior offensive line is beat up. Thinking that played into your decision here. But really what I want to know is, when do you think we start to see Devontae Wyatt being a part of the Packers equation, and does he help Kenny Clark when he does eventually start to make his impact?
Yeah, that's what I've been hoping for as well. I think Jaron Reed, who's been starting alongside Kenny Clark in the interior, not the best player he's kind of known for being like a pass rushing defensive interior player, but he's not really that great at it. He's just kind of compiled stats from being on the field. He's definitely not a Kenny Clark level pass rusher. I liked Devontae Wyatt a lot coming out. I thought he'd get a little bit more of an opportunity early, but it's hard. Rookie defensive linemen take a while to develop, right? So I think it could be, maybe after the midway point, maybe post bye or something like that, we start to see more Devontae Wyatt get worked in there. But either way, I mean, Kenny Clark by himself has been on fire to start the season. And yeah, like you said, he gets a nice matchup against a banged up Tampa Bay offensive line. So hoping that helps. And then having Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith on either side of him doesn't hurt either, right?
Yeah.
I never realized how long it really took defensive interior players to develop until I drafted Derek Brown in our first ever rookie draft in All-22. And thinking, did I just draft a bust? But now it's 3 years in and you're starting to see, he's not grading so poorly. So, yeah.
Ed Oliver too, right? From the Bills. Is another guy that took a while to come on, and he had a nice back half of last season, and obviously got hurt early this year, but he should be back soon. And he was looking pretty good too, but it took a while, right? So these guys don't always hit the ground running like a Nick Bosa, for example, on the edge.
I always make fun of Ray for being the ageist of the group, like discriminating against older guys. But, I definitely have a concern with Wyatt. I think he's 23 already, taking this time to develop. As a dynasty guy, it's a little concerning.
Yeah. You like to look at those things. They are important for dynasty, right? I think even Devin Lloyd, like the linebacker for Jacksonville, he's a bit older as well. There's a few guys who should be good dynasty prospects, but they're a little bit on the older side. I did quotations, I couldn't see them, but
24 and a half, Chris. He's really old, actually.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that is concerning then.
That COVID year is throwing everything for a loop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He'll need a walker next year.
So, John, you're in a nickel formation. Just for those of you that are listening and can't see the graphic right now, your two defensive interiors are Kenny Clark and Dalvin Tomlinson, the ex-Giant. And your edge rushers are Marcus Davenport and Chandler Jones. So I want to ask you about Chandler Jones. Chandler Jones really has not graded particularly well to this point, somewhere in the 50s, right?
Yeah.
So what I wanted to ask you, Dennis Daly, who he's probably going to go up against this week, his 13.5 pass blocking grade, that doesn't scare you at all?
Yeah, that was pretty much the only reason that I chose Chandler Jones this week is because of Dennis Daly. And yeah, that pass blocking grade is pretty abysmal. It's pretty much the only reason I chose Dalvin Tomlinson as well, going against Logan Stenberg on the Lions with his 0.0 and 4.0 pass blocking grades.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I wanted to try to pick some easy matchups for my defensive linemen. And I know Jones hasn't really popped as far as the grades go, but even at 32, whatever he is, he's probably going to whoop Daly consistently in this one. So hoping that he can get me another one of those dark horse picks to emerge.
Yeah, it's a really good pick. I actually almost erased our picks for edge and put Chandler Jones in there, but I'm not going to cheat. We'll play fair.
Fair enough.
Maybe next week if we lose really bad this week,
Yeah.
So I want to move on. Like Bobby mentioned, you're in the nickel formation, right? So we have two linebackers, Ernest Jones from the Rams and then Bobby Okereke from the Colts. And I think the interesting name here is Ernest Jones, right? He kind of just burst onto the scene in week one as a young linebacker that performed really well. So I guess a couple questions here, like is Ernest Jones as valuable to you in an IDP format? Because of course, as dynasty players like us and many others are, it kind of ruins your perception of young players in season long, right? You just look, you see that age and you go, oh yeah, that's a pretty valuable asset for the long term, even if there's any type of valuable performance there at all, right? Just given that age, you sort of see stars and think 10 years down the line, everything is going to just be smooth sailing. So has All-22 changed your perception in IDP or vice versa? And, as to how that you view a guy like Ernest Jones, for example?
Yeah. So, for the linebacker position specifically, like I don't value it as highly in like a balanced IDP league, just because there's so many of them. They're pretty replaceable. You could find them on waivers. You just need that kind of warm body production. But as far as the All-22 way of looking at it, the linebackers don't really grade that well as a whole. It's a really tough position to play and they get picked on a lot. So finding the good ones is really tough. So when somebody like Ernest Jones, who is a younger player, like you said, like starts to show, some splash plays and pop a little bit in the grades, I kind of want to jump on them and try to acquire them now while they're still attainable, basically, because once they reach Micah Parsons levels, they're not going to be as easily acquired, obviously. So, I do like Ernest Jones. I think he is a good player. He's getting the snaps now as well, so he should hit that snap share minimum that we need for him to count in our scoring. And I'm all about trying to acquire these guys young, and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, Ernest Jones, whoever it is that's grading well that you can acquire now, especially at linebacker attack for sure.
I think those names were near and dear to Bobby's heart.
Right. Yeah, they were.
Koramoah.
Yes, that's my guy.
Nice. Yeah,
cool.
That's a good one.
So we talked about you chose nickel, right? So we got 3 corners here. You got Nate Hobbs out of Las Vegas. You got Marshawn Lattimore out of New Orleans, and Mike Hilton in Cincinnati. But I want to concentrate on Nate Hobbs. So a lot of the All-22 community credits Gus Bradley for Nate Hobbs' success, right, last year. Now with Patrick Graham, we're seeing him kind of keep the pace. He didn't miss a step there. Mm-hmm. So how much did scheme play into your decision making in this platform? And specifically, do you think it impacts cornerback even more significantly?
Yeah, I think it can, right? Playing in to their strengths, right? Some corners are better in zone coverages, others are better in man. But looking at like Nate Hobbs specifically, he's just a player that I really liked. I thought he plays well. He's actually a good IDP asset as well so far this season. So I do have a soft spot for him. But I do like the way the Raiders kind of used him, right? They used him a lot in the slot in week 1. They used him more outside week 2. So they obviously trust him to do both jobs because he's capable of doing it, especially playing in the slot. It's not an easy thing to do. And he has this, I think what did I put here? The 6th highest coverage grade when lined up in the slot so far this year. So that's really impressive. He's got an 80.7 overall grade on the year. And the matchup as well, Ryan Tannehill or Malik Willis, whoever plays, and that Titans wide receivers core. There's nobody that really scares me there. So corner's tough, but I think Nate Hobbs can be a decent scorer this week and beyond.
Not to mention Tannehill probably won't have much time to throw with his 13.5 graded left tackle blocking for him.
Yeah. Hoping Nate Davis is the only one that that keeps him clean. That's it.
Moving on to your safeties. So I'm going to probably butcher this name, but Talanoa Hufanga from San Francisco and Tyrann Mathieu. So, of course, I'm going to ask you about the name that I'm probably going to butcher again, and that's Talanoa Hufanga. And I kind of want to know, where did he come from? It's 5th-round pick last year. Didn't play much at all. When he did play, he graded pretty poorly, and now all of a sudden he's the highest graded safety in our platform. What happened? What do you like about his game? What's raising his grade so high? And do you think this is sustainable or just like a 2-week thing?
Yeah, not that I think it's going to be as high for the entire season, but he's, just kind of riding the hot hand here. And especially for Hufanga, he was a player I really liked coming out of college, and I thought maybe he'd have a chance to be an IDP asset as well. And he was somebody that came out of USC and was being used as like a pass rusher. He was used in the box. He kind of did everything there. And the 49ers are kind of using him in a similar way, not so much as a pass rusher early, but he's popped in the grades, that's for sure. And going up against Russell Wilson, who's been pretty volatile, and we know what his cooking has looked like so far this season, I think he has a chance to at least keep it going for another week.
Yeah, it's a really good pick, and I think you're probably right. And then just to round it out, your punters and kickers, which won't really dig into too much, but how do you choose a guy like a punter? Like you have Matt Hack from Indianapolis. What goes into that decision?
Yeah, not much. I'll tell you that much. I was looking at the punters and I was like, okay, who has the most kicks to land inside the 20? Whose offense is fairly ineffective? And I think, for the Colts, we saw what they did last week. I don't think they'll turn the ball over as much, I think, but I don't think they're going to move the ball a ton either. So I think he'll have some opportunities to get some punts in there. And yeah, I like that he was landing them inside the 20. That's going to help his grade as well. But that's pretty much it. Punter was tough, man. I haven't got a chance to look too much into special teams grades before, so I appreciate you guys forcing me to look at that to figure it out.
Okay, so to close out John's defense here, he had Kenny Clark and Dalvin Tomlinson at defensive interior. His edge rushers were Marcus Davenport and Chandler Jones. Linebackers Ernest Jones and Bobby Ukariki. And then corners were Nate Hobbs, Marshawn Lattimore, and Mike Hilton. And then to close it out at safety, I'm going to butcher this name, Talanoa Hufanga and Tyrann Mathieu. So, again, Jon, so great to have you on. We really appreciate your time. We had a lot of fun doing this. We hope you did too. And then everybody listening out there, Jon, he's on PFF's website. You can find his articles there. And then, give him a follow on Twitter if you don't already. It's at PFF_Macri, and that's MACRI. Jon, again, thank you so much. Can't say it enough. Your support's been tremendous. And it was super fun talking football with you.
Yeah, and for anybody listening, Jon does some great breakdowns too that are applicable to both All-22 and IDP. So he's really a good follow on Twitter. Highly recommend for sure.
Cool. So as always, thank you everyone so much for tuning in. Make sure you check your lineup every week, right? Go set your depth chart, pick your formation, and make some trades. People get excited about those. And if you don't already, which would be super weird, give us a follow on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Also at TikTok at All22_PFF. And then leave us a review on our podcast network, whether that's YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And thanks again for tuning in.